What's going on, YouTube? We are back, and if you watch my last vlog, you will know that we are going to be renovating Eris's enclosure because we had a bit of a leaking issue. Now, some of the things that I said that I didn't like about this enclosure was this back wall, and as you can see, I've come up with a bit of a solution that hasn't taken too much work. I cut a whole bunch of bamboo, and I've secured them as a bit of a screen and then stuffed both real and fake palm leaves in behind to create a bit of a screen, so when you're looking at this through the foreground foliage, you won't really be able to see where the jungle starts and where it ends. I've secured these with expanding foam and tore them up, and then down the bottom here, these are actually freestanding, so I can remove them if I need to. Another thing we changed was we cut a big old hole in this shelf here, and this is to house one of the plants to raise the real foliage up high. This is her favorite spot generally over here, so we're going to leave enough space there. And we'll see. Hopefully she doesn't squash this plant too much, but it's a pretty hardy species that I've got going there. But speaking of plants, we need to get them back in soil and planted. So we're going to get cracking with that and hopefully have them all planted this morning. This is where the pond is going to go. I've got 2 of these trays. This is just a standard kitty litter tray. This is going to be a placeholder, and then the actual pond is going to sit inside that, which we will make a separate video on how to do that pond. So yeah, you can see where we're at. So let's start with covering all this expanding foam. And for that, we're going to do my silicone putty trick, which is really simple and a much better alternative in my opinion than just smearing on silicone and then sprinkling on some dirt. I've tried that in the past and it generally doesn't do that good of a job and doesn't last all that long. So we're going to switch to the first person cam and you'll get to see how I do this. Super duper easy. So let's get into it. Okay, so nice and simple. You're going to need yourself some dirt. In this case I'm using peat moss, but this works with sand, coir peat, pretty much anything as long as it's dry enough to stick. And then we're going to go in with our silicone. So I'm going with a roof and gutter silicone with the theory that this is going to, if this was on a roof, that water's going into gutters, which is going into water tanks, which we then drink, so they're not going to be putting terrible chemicals and agents in this. Alternatively, if you've got access to aquarium silicone or 100% silicone, that's probably a better option, but it's insanely expensive here, and I'm not going to spend that money on something that's just a covering. If it was for a fish tank, then I would probably invest the money more, but this is just to get a nice cover. So let's get cracking. All you do, take your lid off so you get the most out of it, and you're going to squeeze a nice blob in here. Now, I do a little bit at a time because it can get tricky to get it to mix fully. So I'm going to put this down here in my mess on something that's not going to create more mess. And you're just going to bury this. And then you're going to squish it, flatten it out, flip it over, get all the sticky surfaces covered. You're essentially going to knead this like it was bread, I guess. Roll it See, that's really sticky still. I don't want it that sticky. So back in, flip it, squish it, turn it all around, fold it in half, squish it into a ball again. Still too sticky. You could put it in like this, but it's harder to work with. And the trick with this is to find the good medium where it's sticky enough to adhere, but not so sticky that it's a pain to work with. So right about there, we're getting there now. It's a little bit tackier than I would like. Back in. Right there, that's what we want there. So it's not sticking to my gloves, but I can still feel it's a little bit tacky, so it's going to stick well when we adhere it into the expanding foam. You should be able to roll it into a ball, shape it, do whatever you want with it. Nice and easy. Okay, so up here in the enclosure, you can see we've got our foam, and this is as simple as tear a section off and smush it. That's the technical word for this, smushing it into place, and you're aiming to cover all of the exposed expanding foam. Get it all in and around, covering up the base. This will help hold this in place. They're pretty secure. And you can build this up quite thick and it'll still set as well, which is pretty cool. In Odin's enclosure, I used this technique to create the vines, which was the first time trying it that way, and it worked really, really well. So I think I'll definitely be trying that again in the future, and probably be my go-to. There's the wire from that plant there. I'll just bend that around, shove it into the expanding foam. And then cover it up. Let us know in the comments what you think of the first person camera. Do you like this sort of style of video, or would you prefer what I've done in the past where it's more of a setup fixed camera? Do you think I should do time-lapse for this sort of stuff with just some basic instructions to start with, or do you prefer real time? Let us know. I want to continue growing this channel. It's something that I want to put more time into, even though creating time is not the easiest thing for me to do, but I feel like this is something that can help people, can show people some tricks. And just like that, we're all locked in, covered up, and looking good. I even did this little bit down here, just to add a bit more durability to that foam. This is all going to be covered by substrate anyway, so I'm not really that concerned about it. I just didn't want the connection points to start deteriorating and becoming brittle and have all of these just fall over. But all in all, liking how that looks. So next step is the substrate barrier and get the substrate in. Okay, so this time around I'm going to be using geotextile fabric as the substrate barriers. Yes, plural. So because I've got the drain, which is here, I really don't want any debris getting down and clogging that pipe up and causing me more issues. So I'm going to do one layer like this. Then I'm going to do the drainage layer on top of that, and then a divider as well. The reason I went with geotextile fabric was because I couldn't get any more of that matting, and although I did like it, it does break down, and I didn't see any of the roots trying to penetrate down through it anyway, so I figured I'd give something new a go. And this stuff is really, really interesting to use. It wicks water well, so definitely be using it in some future projects. So we'll get the drainage layer in, the other section of fabric on, and then we will mix up the new substrate and get that in and start playing with some plants. Just like that, we have that all back in. So now the secondary barrier, and then the substrate. And there we have it. Drainage layer and barriers are in place. So now I'll show you what I'm going to do with the substrate. We're going to mix the old substrate through some fresh, which will hopefully dry it out a bit. We'll do a thin layer first, and then we'll place some plants and then add to it from there. Okay, so here's our fresh substrate mix, which as you can see is very, very chunky, and I made it chunkier than normal because we're going to mix the old substrate through this. Now, the new substrate is a mix of a couple of different types of natural mulch, some worm castings, coir peat, and peat moss. This will give lots of organics that will break down in the substrate, feeding the plants and the bugs that I plan on putting in here, because I do plan on adding extra life. So So let's mix our old substrate in here, which as you can see is still very wet. So the hope is that the new substrate will absorb some of that water. Now mix it nice and thoroughly. This will get all of the good bacteria and microorganisms that was already in the enclosure mixed through. Now I go for a nice chunky mix to give better drainage. As you can see, that's looking nice. Add a little bit more in. Now we have a nice chunky substrate that is damp, not wet. So now that we've got our substrate mixed, the next step is we will scoop it into the enclosure and create a layer that's about 1 inch or 2 thick. Now I'm going to do this because it'll create a foundation, and then I can put my plants and hardscape in place and then fill it back in from there, and that way I'm not digging through the substrate, disturbing everything and creating unnecessary issues like the weed barriers moving. So let's get that first little layer in, and then we can have a look at some plants. Okay, with that first base layer in place, we will start placing the hardscape, including the pond, and then we will have a look at some plants. That'll work quite well. Some plants here, here. Now let's figure something out for this spot. Okay, we've got a couple of good sized bits of hardscape there that we can tuck plants in behind. We've got the pond in place, and I've dry fit the insert. So next up, let's place some plants. Okay, so you'll remember the nice tidy room that I created. Well, I might have gone a bit crazy and filled it up with plants. So, oh, we forgot one piece of important hardscape. The good old Buddha head. Let's get him down here. Nice front and center. Alright, first plant we're going with is the, I'm not even going to try and pronounce that, but I believe it's a form of dragon tail. Should do quite well in here, hopefully, because it's a really, really cool looking plant. We'll leave the bamboo support on there for now. As you can see, it sort of trails out, and that's what we're going to fit up here. Fill this space in. Just like that. Next up, we got this bargain bin find. Normally $60, and I got it for $35. I like this because it looks quite sort of cane-like, and I think it'll make a good backdrop piece. So we'll get that out of the pot and tuck into the back. We're starting to fill out now. Okay. Next up was probably going to be the bamboo palm, I think, which will stick back in this spot here. So then we're going to continue to put bits of bamboo to blend the foreground to the background. Okay, so as you might be able to start figuring out, we're going for a very dense looking jungle this time round. So we've got the pot in the shelf, this big guy filling in the back, the bamboo palm, which is the start of our bamboo thicket. So next up, we're going to go the umbrella tree in this spot. Then the Benjamina will be in here, coming forward. And we need to get our branch that comes across in place. That one in place. Now we've got the Benjamina, which we'll tuck in here. Now I think the next thing that we should do is get this big branch in place. Okay, that's the majority of the large hardscape and plants in place. The primary basking branch there. Plenty of spots down low to hide. It's going to be near impossible to find her in here, but that's fine. So now we'll put in a few small filler plants. Down the bottom I've got a bunch of creeping fig that I want to fill in the bottom with. And we might chuck in a couple of the parlor palms down in this corner. And we'll go from there. But it's starting to look like a jungle. Just like that, we've got all of our plants in, big and small. A little bit more hardscaping to do with the bamboo, but all in all it looks pretty damn good. Very, very dense, which is what I was going for. So now I've just got to top up the soil and put the bamboo in, and then we can work on the pond. So I may have gone ahead without yous and added the bamboo in. I'm absolutely loving how this has come out. We've got the bamboo thicket in the front, bamboo thicket in the back, tying it all in nice and cohesive. All the plants are looking really, really cool. So we've just got the pond to do. And then we'll get into some techie stuff as well. I've got a few ideas and surprises, and I'm really looking forward to that. So make sure you tune in for part 2, which should be out in a couple of weeks. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for following along. Comment, let me know what you like, what you don't. Do you think I should do more of the hands-on first-person sort of stuff, or do you prefer the more sort of ASMR style where I film from a distance and just get stuff done? Let me know, and I'll see you on the next one.